So I've been trying to get the second video out, but I keep having technical issues or sick issues. But I wanted to get it out there. Some of you are probably wondering how the unfucking is going. And, well, after I did my last video, I had a guy call me and tell me I was going to be charged with felony. And at the time, I kind of had a little meltdown, a little bit, and he was going to charge me for bouncing that check. And so, unless I came up with $2,200 the next morning. Well, I talked to my sister and felt better, a little bit better. And then the next day, I had a friend of mine call, and he was questioning me, like what I do with my time, how I spend my time, why am I taking out student loans for school, and stuff like that. And it got me thinking, and it put me on this whole roll of things that I realized and learned. But I was thinking about how much I love school and love what I'm going to school for. I'm getting my master's right now in consciousness and transformative studies and plan on getting my PhD so I can be a professor and teach. Besides that, I want to write a book and write stories down. And so this video is basically why I'm doing that. So my natural personality has always been to dream really big. I'm extremely optimistic and I always think everything is possible. So when I was younger, I was raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And my dad always talked about stuff that was kind of out there, like aliens, UFOs, Bigfoots, ghosts. We would lay on the tramp and look for UFOs, and we actually did find them. But anyway, one of the things that he talked about as far as church stuff goes is that, you know, there's going to be the end of the world and Christ is going to return to earth and we're going to live in the millennium. And the millennium was like Christ comes and he reigns, and during that time everyone would live in peace and harmony. There'd be no bloodshed. We wouldn't die. Everyone would have what they want and need. Everyone would give everything freely. Like, basically, we would live as if we thought to like Christ. And, you know, me, that was like, woo, when's that going to happen? I want to live there. And so, my dad taught me, well, when the righteous are ready. And what that meant was that it didn't have anything to do with like, oh, you got to do all the correct things, like go to church and stuff like that. It was all about that you had to think like Christ did. And so I was like, well, what does that mean? And so I read every scripture on the end of the world and underlined everything and about the millennium and what Christ wrote, what that meant. I wanted to be that and like teach others to be that, to be ready, because I was like, I want to live in the millennium. And anyway, when I got into high school, my parents wanted me to try seminary. They didn't require I take it, but I loved it. So I continued to take it, and I wanted to be a seminary teacher, but then I found out at the time anyway that women couldn't be seminary teachers. So I was like, well, fine, then I will get my degree in philosophy and religion and teach it at the as a professor, and, you know, get my PhD. Well, I ended up studying so much that I left the church because my beliefs no longer fit into that box, and I no longer believe like that specific story. But I ended up studying with the Church of Christ and like memorizing the Bible, and then I joined the Baha'i faith, and I no longer consider myself Baha'i either because I just don't have the exact same beliefs. I learned about like the law of manifestation and stuff like that in like 2004 is when I first heard about it. And then I ended up getting my degree in philosophy, my bachelor's. And but anyway, even though like my beliefs, like the specific beliefs changed, my belief that we are evolving to like a higher consciousness, to a higher way of living, and that physical reality will actually change as our consciousness changes, is still there. And I still want to be at a higher consciousness myself and help others to basically like wake up, because that's what it feels like when you know, every time you discover something new or change something about how you're living. And a lot of times what it seems like for me is that I already knew that. Why didn't I know that? It's like it was right there in front of me, or I've been told that a million times, but it's like something didn't click. And so when it clicks, it feels like you like had some kind of wakeful moment or something. But anyway, as far as the stories go, I always thought my stories of my life would make a really interesting book. It wouldn't be boring, but I had the thought, like, why would I want to spread that type of negative shit, like the negative shit, into the world? I don't want to do that. And then one time while I was on psychedelics after a traumatic event in my life, it's like it was, I saw how to do it, saw how I could use my stories in my life and write them down and actually help people to have some type of realization, or come higher in their consciousness, be better in some way. And so that's what I decided to do. And I started writing them down, but they're all kind of scattered in my computer and stuff. And I've made a lot of excuses for not doing anything with them. Like, I don't have time, I don't have money to take the time to do it. Those are the main things. And when my friend had talked to me, I really started thinking about how I feel when I do certain things. Like, how do I feel when I'm delivery driving? I feel good when I'm listening to stuff specifically that I wanted to listen to, because then I'm multitasking. But even though I'm not a multitasker, but how do I feel when I do my schoolwork? Like, when I'm into it, like, I get so into it. I love it. I love writing. I love reading the stuff. I'm like blown away. I always want to share everything I read. So I started focusing more on my schoolwork and more on writing and more on this video. But then I had to pay my rent. So I listened to a lot while I was driving to get money to pay my rent. And it was like the more that came to me, more information that came to me, the more I saw. One thing that's been prominent in my life, like, it seems like it gets more and more every day, is that the synchronicities. Like, a lot of you know I listen to tarot card readers. Well, I started doing that because I came across one and it was talking about exactly what was going on in my life. And so I was like, what the hell? So I started listening to them. But I noticed that as I follow more on my path, as to what I really feel drawn to doing, even more so, I started noticing more patterns. And just this is all within the last month or so, I started noticing how like all these connections in the tarot stories. I noticed how like the story would be like about me and specific people in my life, but then I noticed that like I would play a different part in a different aspect in my life, and it would get bigger and get smaller, and like I would see patterns where like if I'm dealing with a specific person, the card for that person represented like say my hopes and dreams for life, and that's what I was focusing on in my head. Like just different things like that. I just saw like patterns like everywhere. And the way I was picturing it in my head, it was like patterns within patterns within patterns, and they were like the same pattern. And then I was like, oh, it's like a fractal. And so I decided to look up fractals and listen to stuff on fractals. So I had a better understanding. And then that's when I realized that fractal antennas are used in cell phones. So like if you have a straight line antenna and you bend it into a fractal pattern, it picks up more signals and you can make it smaller. That's how they get so many different signals coming in on cell phones, and they're not huge. But then I started thinking about the law of attraction and how, oh, like we're made up of like all these little fractals, and like it's picking up these signals from the universe. Because in case you don't know, space is not empty. It's completely full of energy, and it's full of more energy than matter contains, way more energy. So I'm like, well, how do you change the fractal pattern to pick up different signals that are not like traumatic events and shitty signals, right? So that's what I was thinking about. I'm like, how do I change that? And also I was like, how do antennas work? You know? So I read about how antennas work, and from what I kind of understand, is that like we send out there's a specific signal sent out, and the signal that resonates with it is the one that we hear or see. That's a short answer. Hopefully it makes sense. But anyway, so I was like, okay, so you gotta change the signal that you're sending out. And so as I was researching fractals, I came across a physicist named Nassim Haramein, and his stuff blew me away. And some people find it controversial, but I just thought it was awesome because the way he was talking about it was kind of how I came to find him anyway. Like he was talking about how when he was a kid, he started seeing things in dots. Like he saw like himself as a dot, and then got bigger and saw his bus as a dot, and got bigger, saw his city as a dot in the world, and dots, dots, dots. And then he started imagining himself going into like his hand and seeing the dots in there, and he's just like, oh, everything's a dot, like. And basically came to the conclusion that like the universe is fractal in nature. So like, it gets infinitely bigger and infinitely smaller, and what he was saying was that like each part of the universe, as you get smaller and smaller, contains the information of the entire universe within each part. And he proved it mathematically with like the proton, showing that the amount of information within a proton is the amount of information in the entire universe. And his theory is that like the universe, or that like protons are like mini black holes. But I won't go into that. But basically, though, what it comes to is that like it's kind of like a hologram, where when you take a hologram, if you break it in half, then each half will have the information for the entire hologram within it. And you can do that and break it down, break it down, break it down, break it down, and you'll have the same picture pop up from each little piece. And so I started thinking about like how many cells are in our body. And I started thinking about how many atoms in our cells and how many protons are in atoms. And then I was like thinking about how, when we say I, we think of ourselves as like a person, like in this body. And how we have access to all the information in the universe. But it's just about tuning into that signal, the signal of the information. And then I thought about too, like how every single proton in the universe is entangled, meaning that, if you have an action on one proton, it affects every other proton in the universe. It doesn't necessarily mean it does the same thing. It just affects it, though. They all are in communication non-locally. It's instantaneous. And then I was thinking about how, like, that brought, like, a whole new meaning or level to what being one means to me. And then I drove around for a few days and I kept, like, crying because I kept thinking about, like, I was, like, so in love with everyone. And, how, like, everything we do, how we feel, like how we treat ourselves, how we treat other people, like how everything that we do affects everything in the universe. And then another thing that Nassim was talking about was how, the evolution of the universe and how there's like a feedback that we get back to evolve. So like, what we send out into the universe, it sends back information and feeds it back in. So I was thinking about like, some of the negative experiences I've had and like what kind of feedback I sent out from that. Was I reacting from it? Normally, yes. And and what signal I was sending back out so that what was going to come back into me. And I was thinking about how, like, well, if I want to change the world and I want to change my world, and how, what I send back out when I do have those negative experiences matters if I'm wanting this world. It also made me rethink the whole, like suicidal tendency thoughts and harming yourself thoughts. Because I'm like, oh my gosh, like, you can't, besides like people being sad and stuff, like when someone commits suicide, like when you harm yourself, you can't just think of it as only harming yourself. Like you're harming the entire universe and what's sent back into the world. And like you can take it even further, and I know that I haven't, like, because I haven't changed all these habits, but it's like even the way you take care of yourself, it's like in the Mormon church, I remember being taught like, oh, your body's a temple. Well, really, it's like there's a whole nother level to that. Like the way you treat your body is the way you're treating the entire universe. Like it's just everything is connected. And another thing that I think about a lot, I've thought about the concept of oneness a lot. And when I think of I, what is it that I am? Like, why am I experiencing I from the perspective of Sonia? And this is like my own little thing, but like I think about like the evolution, like say of the human body, okay? And how cells had to come together to form like the heart or any organ, okay? And they have to work together to make up that organ. And then these organs come together and they work together to make up me, like Sonia. And then my awareness is at that level of an individual Sonia. And I can't help but think of like humanity as cells of an organ or a body or organs of a body that just hasn't quite figured out how to work together. And so when I think of oneness, I think and I think of like a world of like peace and oneness and stuff. I think of humanity as evolving to the point of working harmoniously together, and that the awareness becomes awareness on a level where we're all one. And I know that might sound a little bit out there, but that's actually what I think about when I think about what oneness is. It's like we'll all have access to that one mind. And the whole purpose for me writing those stories is to illustrate ways to become closer to that. It's to help people evolve consciously and to love and be successful and be everything they want to be, regardless of their situation or what's happened to them. Like, I'm trying to relate to people. So yeah. One last thing I want to say is that my stories are very forward and blunt, and they have all kinds of crazy things in there. Like, I don't have a filter. I am changing all the names so that nobody has to worry. But they are also the way I remember them. If some people remember them differently, I'm not going to sit and argue about what happened. Because they're used for a good purpose. Well, at least that's my intention. And I've forgiven everyone in those stories as well. Also, I write kids' stories. No one steal my kids' stories. So anyway, that's where I'm at. That's what I'm doing. I'll see how it goes.